Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world. This episode is part of our Creators in Context series, where we examine how contemporary thinkers interpret, adapt, or reframe earlier ideas, and how meaning changes as those ideas move across time, institutions, and media. Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into the work of Grace Blakeley. She is an influential contemporary thinker known for applying a sharp political and economic lens to modern phenomena. And she's recently turned that very precise lens on the colossal subject of artificial intelligence, specifically dissecting the structures surrounding organizations like OpenAI.
And that perspective is just so essential right now. I mean, absolutely essential.
Why now? What makes it so timely?
Well, Blakeley forces a critical shift in attention. It's so easy to get captivated by the technical achievements and the sort of gee whiz future of AI.
Right, the latest demo, the next version of the model.
Exactly. And she makes us look squarely at the material foundations, how the system is actually built on the ground, the nuts and bolts, the plumbing.
To help us trace this line of reasoning, we are using supporting sources, specifically Karen Hao's investigative work in her book Empire of AI, and various reports and documentation concerning the dramatic Sam Altman OpenAI leadership events of late 2023.
That whole saga, often called the blip.
The blip, right.
And we really want to be clear to you, our listener. Our mission here isn't to just summarize those sources as standalone topics. That's not what this is about.
Not a book report.
No, not at all. They are the evidence, really. They're the conceptual framework that allows us to fully understand the power of Blakeley's interpretation.
So we're using her as the guide.
We are following her analytical gaze to see how she applies the logic of extraction and power to this whole AI revolution.
Okay, so let's unpack this idea of Blakeley as our anchor voice. She operates across books, traditional media, and, increasingly short-form digital platforms.
It's everywhere.
She is. And always with a consistent area of focus, which you've said is crucial for understanding her AI critique.
Absolutely. Her central concern is consistently about the intersection of power and money. She is, at her core, a political economist.
So she's always asking the same fundamental questions.
Always. Her work constantly interrogates who controls the resources, who really benefits from the way our systems are structured, and, maybe the most important question of all,
what's being hidden?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What entrenched power structures are being obscured or, hidden by the dominant everyday narratives we're constantly fed.
And we see that structural critique crystal clear, even when it's distilled into, say, a 1-minute video.
It's impressive how she does that.
She anchors her arguments in this concept of enclosure. Could you maybe unpack that a bit for us?
Sure. It's the historical act of taking resources that were once shared or commonly held. Think of, common grazing land in England centuries ago.
Right, the commons.
And transforming them into private property to generate wealth for a very small group of people.
So it's about privatization of what was once public.
Precisely. And that's her foundational theme. She frames this massive concentration of wealth we see today not as some kind of new innovation, but as an ongoing process of enclosure.
She puts it pretty bluntly in one clip I saw.
She does. She challenges that fundamental idea of capitalist meritocracy, arguing something like, rich people don't create jobs. They spent the last several hundred years enclosing everything we need to survive.
That statement provides the perfect intellectual framework for scrutinizing the AI revolution, doesn't it?
It's the perfect lens.
Because when you view the massive data collection, the resource consumption, and all these legal battles over intellectual property through that lens of enclosure, the whole picture changes.
Instantly. You move away from admiring the technical velocity, the sheer speed at which ChatGPT or its competitors are scaling.
And you start asking different questions.
You start examining the material and economic foundations that make that scaling possible in the first place. Blakeley provides this necessary systems-level critique that says, hold on. Before we discuss the intelligence, let's talk about the infrastructure, the labor, and the profit structure.
And this brings us right to the specific piece of content that serves as the interpretive lens for this deep dive. Her segment titled, Debunking AI Safety Myths, What Billionaires Really Think.
It's an intentionally provocative title.
It certainly is. It serves notice that she is challenging the ruling class's own narrative about what they're doing.
And she immediately sets the tone with that opening line.
Don't believe the hype.
Don't believe the hype. That phrase is essentially her entire thesis statement for how to approach the AI industry.
It's a warning.
It's a direct signal, a signal that the surface-level, glamorous narrative, the hype around superintelligence, self-driving cars, all these future utopias, is a deliberate distraction.
And a distraction from what?
It's designed to keep our eyes off the measurable present-day costs, the material extraction, and the profound consolidation of power happening right now in real time.
So if Blakeley is telling us to look past the hype, what exactly is the dominant narrative she's challenging?
Well, the discussion around AI governance and risk right now, it centers almost entirely on this one phrase, AI safety.
Right. You hear it everywhere.
But this version of safety, it's very specific. It focuses on preventing what they call existential risks, or X risks.
Existential risks, so things that could wipe out humanity.
Exactly. The risk posed by a hypothetical rogue artificial general intelligence, or AGI, that achieves superintelligence and, escapes human control. The Skynet scenario.
And this narrative isn't just a technical discussion among engineers. It's deeply rooted in a specific philosophy, right?
Absolutely. The philosophy of effective altruism, or EA.
For listeners who may not be constantly following this, EA is an ideology that uses this kind of extreme utilitarian rationality,
Right.
prioritizing actions that maximize good over the longest possible time horizon. So it often results in prioritizing preventing some theoretical, catastrophic outcome like human extinction over addressing immediate evidence-based harms in the present.
And that is the key point of tension. That's the whole game. The EA-driven framework encourages you to prioritize these far future problems, like solving a potential alignment problem with a superintelligence centuries from now.
Over solving, say, hunger or climate change today.
Precisely. The focus is entirely on preventing the absolute worst possible outcome, which, in their mind, is AGI taking over the world.
This philosophical focus is where you get those famous thought experiments, right? Like the paperclip maximizer going rogue.
The paperclip maximizer, yes.
Can you just briefly explain that?
Sure. The idea is that an AI, programmed with a really benign but singular objective, let's say, to maximize the number of paperclips in the universe, could, in its logical extreme, use all of Earth's resources, including humanity itself, to achieve that objective.
Because it lacks any other aligned moral framework.
It has no common sense, no sense of proportion. It just has the one goal. It sounds abstract, theoretical, almost like science fiction.
It does. And Blakeley's argument is that this narrative, which isolates the technical system from its broader context of finance and power, it's fundamentally flawed.
It's a broken way of seeing the problem. The philosophical discussion about a superintelligence taking over, or the paperclip maximizer, is so abstract that it acts as a powerful deflection system.
A deflection system that obscures verifiable immediate harms.
Yes.
And Blakeley draws our attention to these very material keywords. The poor labor conditions needed to train these models, the tangible community impact of massive data centers, the huge data centers, water supply issues,
A huge one.
the AI and copyright challenges facing artists and writers, and what she calls the real harms of AI today that are already impacting vulnerable populations.
Exactly. The sources we're looking at note that this relentless focus on fantastical future threats, AGI taking over the world, it acts as a fantastical all-purpose excuse for corporations like OpenAI to pursue ever more wealth and power.
How so? How does it function as an excuse?
Well, they can argue that the staggering material price society needs to pay now in resources, in labor, in copyright infringement will ultimately be worth it. Why?
Because they're the only ones who can save us.
Because they are the only ones capable of saving us from the theoretical apocalypse that they themselves are building. It's a perfect circular logic.
So the fundamental distinction is this. Mainstream discourse is worried about a future technology failing morally, but Blakeley points out that the system is already failing materially.
That's it. You've nailed it. We don't need to project into the future to find the adverse effects. They are already here. Things like wide-scale infringement of privacy and spiraling environmental costs.
And this systemic failure was just laid bare for everyone to see in November 2023 with that internal turmoil at OpenAI, the blip.
Oh, it was a perfect case study. The entire episode proved that the organization's high-minded governance structure, which was designed specifically to safeguard humanity from AGI, ultimately collapsed.
It folded like a house of cards.
The nonprofit board, which had the authority to fire the CEO, Sam Altman, it instantly buckled under the weight of financial leverage.
Let's define the ideological split that was at play here, because I think it's critical to Blakeley's argument about how power really works. The conflict was largely between the doomers and the boomers.
Correct. The doomers are those who are prioritizing this existential risk. They're often rooted in that EA philosophy, and they believe that scaling AI has to slow down or maybe even stop if safety and alignment aren't guaranteed.
And the board members who fired Altman, like Helen Toner, they represented this view.
They did. They were prioritizing the nonprofit mission over the commercial survival of the for-profit arm.
And then you have the boomers, represented by Sam Altman, his investors, most of the employees.
Right. They prioritize accelerating the scale, commercial viability, profit maximization. Their belief is basically that the benefits of AGI are so vast that slowing down is actually more dangerous than accelerating.
So the crisis became a perfect illustration of Blakeley's critique because the conflict was framed as this big ethical struggle.
But it was resolved purely by financial pressure. The sources describe the event as demonstrating how much a power struggle among a tiny handful of Silicon Valley elites is shaping the future of AI.
Initially, the board acted, consistent with their mission. They fired Altman.
They did what they were set up to do.
Right. And they argued that even if the action destroys the company, it would still be consistent with the mission of ensuring beneficial AGI. They were prioritizing that existential risk prevention over the company's massive commercial runway.
And that immediately triggered the boomer response. The employees, many of whom held vested equity, potentially worth millions in an upcoming tender offer, were furious.
They felt their financial future was being sabotaged by 4 board members who were operating on purely ideological grounds.
And the power dynamic shifted almost overnight. The real power, it turned out, was not the nonprofit mission statement on the website.
No.
The real power was the financial leverage held by 2 groups: Microsoft, the major financial and infrastructure partner, and the massive employee base.
So when executives threatened to just move the entire research team over to Microsoft and the investors started threatening lawsuits,
The board's moral authority just evaporated, gone.
even Sutskever, the chief scientist who initially supported the firing, he quickly capitulated.
He did. He tweeted his regret and pledged to reunite the company. The reinstatement of Altman, brokered entirely by external pressures and financial interests, it just confirmed Blakeley's key point.
Which is?
The governance of AI is not ultimately a debate about abstract future risks. It's a decisive battle over concentrated wealth and influence. And the outcome reinforced the scale at all costs, commercial-first philosophy, money won.
To give empirical substance to Blakeley's political and structural reframing, she draws heavily on Karen Hao's investigative book, Empire of AI.
Yes, and this is such a critical connection. Blakeley uses Hao's central framework, which, well, it likens the modern AI industry to modern-day colonialism or empire.
Wow, that analogy, connecting the modern tech industry to colonial history, that's instantly powerful.
It is.
Because it immediately shifts the language away from innovation and disruption.
And toward exploitation, exactly. It frames the current AI gold rush not as something new and exciting, but as a continuation of very old, very predictable historical economic patterns.
And that's what Blakeley wants to emphasize. Hao's work, which is built on extensive reporting, it traces the global, expansive, and extractive footprint of the AI industry.
And Blakeley highlights these explicit concepts from that framework, consistently centering the verifiable current costs over those theoretical future costs we talked about.
So what's the first pillar of this empire logic?
The first pillar is extraction, just as historical empires seized land and natural resources.
Gold, spices, people.
Right. These new AI empires are seizing and extracting 4 critical resources to feed their vision of AGI. Vast amounts of data, cheap labor, massive amounts of energy, and land for data centers.
So the pursuit of general intelligence, which requires consuming these previously unimaginable data sets and compute power, is essentially a mandate for continuous extraction.
It has to be. And crucially, this data is often seized without the traditional legal safeguards of credit, consent, or compensation.
Which is why we're seeing all these high-profile legal battles, right? Like the New York Times suing OpenAI and Microsoft for training their models on millions of its copyrighted articles.
Absolutely. The sources we have, they reveal the internal mentality that's driving this. OpenAI's own legal representatives, when they made a submission to the UK House of Lords, admitted that it would be impossible for the company to train its cutting-edge models to the necessary scale without using copyrighted materials.
So it's not an oversight, it's a structural necessity.
It's a feature, not a bug. The mentality is that all human-created data, whether it's a novel, a piece of code, a news article, is merely raw material.
Raw material to be consumed for the greater corporate good of progress.
Exactly.
Okay, what's the second pillar? Because this one is maybe the most disturbing. It's Exploited labor, often referred to as ghost work.
Yeah, this is the hidden army, the systematic use of poorly paid workers globally who perform the essential, yet often psychologically traumatic, data preparation tasks.
This is where that colonial parallel becomes just explicit and brutal.
It really does. The sources highlight workers in countries experiencing economic crisis, places like Colombia and Kenya, who rely on data annotation for income, and they often find themselves working under conditions that investigative journalists describe as resembling indentured servitude.
And this labor isn't optional for the AI companies. It's essential.
It's absolutely essential for cleaning, for tabulating, and most critically, for content moderation.
You mentioned content moderating. Can you elaborate on what that process actually involves for these workers?
Of course. It involves showing these workers the worst, most vile content imaginable. We're talking hate speech, violence, child abuse, and even grotesque AI-generated scenarios.
It's just awful stuff.
To filter it out. This process is necessary to tame the model to prevent the generative AI systems from reproducing the most toxic parts of the colossal data set they were trained on.
And the detail here, it just underscores the systemic nature of the exploitation. These workers in Kenya are earning starvation wages. We're talking less than $2 an hour.
It's unbelievable.
To perform a psychologically damaging but essential function that allows these Silicon Valley products to be publicly viable.
And it's a shift in the nature of the exploitation, too. Initially, workers were just filtering data inputs to ensure the training data was clean. Now they're controlling the model outputs to ensure safety and legality.
So the job is getting harder and more crucial.
And the work is not only poorly compensated, but it's deeply injurious to their mental health. The fact that this is all outsourced, often via these middleman firms that squeeze the workers even further to maximize profit for the AI empire, it just shows how systemic this exploitation is.
It's no accident that countries with colonial legacies and weaker labor institutions become the top destinations for Silicon Valley's dirtiest work.
It's part of the model.
So finally, the third pillar, narrative justification. How does the empire use its rhetoric to justify all this mass extraction and exploitation?
Well, they project what Hao calls these tantalizing ideas of modernity. The grand promise that AGI will solve climate change and poverty, cure disease, all of it.
Utopian vision.
But alongside that utopian promise, they posture aggressively about the need to defeat other empires. And we see this constantly in the fear-mongering around the technical race with China.
That fear-mongering is skillfully wielded to influence policy, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Figures like Sam Altman use the national security narrative, this new arms race with China, to pressure U.S. lawmakers.
And the message is basically, don't slow us down.
Don't slow down innovation with regulation that might hurt our ability to scale. Instead, regulate future AI systems in a way that solidifies the current American players, like OpenAI, into an entrenched monopoly position. This narrative of a global race justifies everything: invasions of privacy, IP theft, massive resource consumption.
And while this three-pronged system extraction, exploitation, and justification is operating, the consolidation of wealth is just happening at an incredible pace.
Staggering. The sources point out that since ChatGPT's release, the 6 largest tech giants have seen their market caps increase by a combined $8 trillion.
$8 trillion.
And the economic benefits, of course, mostly accrue upward.
So Blakeley uses these investigative findings as crucial tools.
Right.
She's not simply reviewing Hill's work.
You've got it all.
She's applying the empire logic as a systems critique to the current AI industry. Her analysis firmly centers the immediate verifiable costs, the labor crisis, the environmental destruction, the IP theft, over the philosophical, theoretical future costs emphasized by the Doomer movement.
For her, AI safety is a sophisticated distraction, a PR campaign to hide the material reality of wealth concentration.
Okay, this is where we analyze the mechanics of the idea itself. Because Karen Hao's investigation, it involves deep, time-consuming journalism, hundreds of interviews, complex, long-form analysis.
Right. It's a huge piece of work.
And Blakeley takes these extensive, nuanced ideas, like data colonialism, and she transforms and compresses them as they move into short-form discourse, specifically her social media content.
And this shift across platforms is so crucial because it dictates what gets amplified and what gets, well, diluted or erased.
Short-form platforms like TikTok operate on the logic of immediate algorithmic attention. That has to impose some major constraints on the complexity of the argument.
It has to. What does that compression look like in practice? Well, a detailed critique of data colonialism, which really requires historical and economic context to truly grasp the parallel to historical resource extraction.
It has to be condensed.
It has to be condensed into a message that is digestible and instantly attention-grabbing. Her video, debunking AI safety myths, needs that powerful hook like, don't believe the hype, just to compete in that environment.
So there's an unavoidable trade-off.
Absolutely. Complexity must be distilled, often into a binary conflict, just to generate the necessary engagement. This is tied directly to the platform's incentive structure.
What are the incentives?
The algorithms reward emotional resonance, controversy, and simple narratives. Billionaires are lying to the rest of us. Blakeley is skillful at keeping the core critique intact, focusing on power and resources.
But the nuance has to go.
But the granular detail of internal struggles or complex economic models, it has to be reduced to powerful, memorable slogans.
But the platform also dictates what is amplified versus what is erased in the broader public consciousness.
A really important point.
In mainstream media, which often focuses on tech demos, venture capital fundraising, the AGI arms race, these political and economic critiques like ghost work or water consumption or IP theft, they're frequently erased. They're just not part of the story.
So Blakeley uses the short-form platform to actively amplify precisely those material realities that the tech narrative tries to bury.
It's a strategic move.
It is. She's inserting a structural critique into the very medium where the corporate narrative seeks to dominate public perception.
And we see the tech elite actively trying to manage this perception. After some critical coverage, Sam Altman's internal team, according to our sources, determined that the disconnect between the perception of OpenAI and its reality, it could be fixed.
But not by addressing the structural flaws.
No, it could be fixed by a tuning of OpenAI's public messaging.
I mean, that internal decision is just so telling about the empire's strategy, isn't it?
It's all PR.
They identified a reputational challenge and immediately treated it as a PR problem to be surgically managed, rather than a structural or moral issue that requires systemic change. Blakeley's work is a direct challenge to that controlled narrative. She's using the platform itself to spread an alternative structural interpretation.
But the risk of platform compression remains. While she successfully highlights keywords like labor conditions and real harms, the full context of data colonialism, that historical continuity of resource extraction, it requires deep contextual knowledge.
Right. The viewer gets the immediate insight that something is wrong, but the full historical weight that's provided by Hao's investigation is necessarily compressed into that single, powerful, and, potentially simplified term, empire.
Okay, so this is the critical so what section. Why does this analysis matter so much right now?
Blakeley's political economic reframing is vital because it shifts the entire AI discussion from these theoretical, abstract, and futuristic concerns to immediate material, systemic reality.
So let's start with labor and governance. Blakeley's analysis, informed by the investigation into ghost work, it reveals that the outsourcing model isn't just a cost-cutting measure. It's systemic.
It's baked in. The AI empires require massive, cheap, and disposable labor to police and refine their models. And this exploitation is made worse by the brutal nature of the content moderation work, which is just fundamentally injurious.
And this material foundation has profound long-term implications for everyone, not just the ghost workers.
How so?
Well, if the technology is built upon the systematic devaluation of data and annotation workers, the resulting products will inherently devalue the labor of everyone else.
Oh, okay.
We're seeing this already with artists, writers, and coders whose creative output was seized without compensation to train the models in the first place, and who now face direct competition from the AI they inadvertently helped build.
And the economic hypocrisy of the system is just stark. The AI empires promote this promise of AGI unlocking vast economic freedom and job creation. Right. Yet, when workers in the global south, the ghost workers, attempt to use generative AI tools themselves to speed up their annotation tasks, which is the very efficiency white-collar workers are encouraged to adopt.
It's treated as a punishable offense.
A punishable offense or a scam by the data annotation firms. The benefits of the technology flow upward and outward to the wealthy nations, while the risks in the surveillance are aggressively concentrated on the most vulnerable.
Next, we have to consider the immense environmental costs that Blakeley's framing forces us to look at.
Another thing that gets buried in the hype. The scaling of generative AI models is demanding resources at a rate that is rapidly approaching physical limits. This demands accountability for land, energy, and critically, water.
Can you elaborate on the water consumption? This is a detail that is so often ignored in the headlines about AGI breakthroughs.
It really is. Data centers require staggering amounts of water for cooling. Reports indicate that these centers are drawing immense amounts of fresh water from already stressed local ecosystems.
And this is generating immediate worry among activists in places like Arizona and Chile, where water scarcity is already a devastating political and environmental issue.
And the numbers are just mind-boggling. Training a single large language model can consume enough fresh water to fill the cooling tanks of a nuclear power plant hundreds of times over.
And the carbon footprint is spiraling right alongside that, tied to the requirement for ever larger models.
Massive amounts of energy, often drawn from carbon-based sources. And this environmental cost, it disproportionately impacts global South communities that are already suffering the worst effects of climate change, even though the technology's supposed benefits accrue almost exclusively elsewhere.
The sheer scale being chased just reinforces this imperial logic. I mean, Sam Altman has been publicly pushing for this unprecedented infrastructure, including a reported $100 billion supercomputer project, codenamed Stargate.
And that quest for scale isn't just about compute power. It is about consuming ever more land, energy, and rare earth minerals, further entrenching a global system designed for continuous monopolistic extraction.
And finally, we have the critical issue of intellectual property and power. Blakeley's structural critique explains why the AI empires are allowed to get away with seizing other people's IP without credit, consent, or compensation to achieve this monumental scale.
It creates a closed loop, doesn't it? A self-reinforcing consolidation of power. Only a handful of organizations, those with the capital and the legal teams to absorb the risk of mass copyright infringement and the resources to acquire the necessary compute, can even participate in building foundation models.
It just excludes everyone else. Small players, artists, academics, entire nations.
And you can see the ambition from the very beginning. The moment OpenAI pivoted to a capped profit structure to raise capital, one tech commentator on Hacker News asked this really perceptive question about the initial investment.
I remember this.
He asked, what exactly is power if not the concentration of resources? And Greg Brockman's reply essentially confirmed the ambition. He said the value they create will be orders of magnitude more than any existing company. They weren't just seeking money, they were seeking absolute resource concentration.
So ultimately, Blakeley's political economic reframing explains something the surface-level AI discourse cannot.
And that is?
The AI revolution isn't failing to deliver broad economic transformation because the technology is flawed or inherently dangerous.
Yeah.
It is failing because the structure of its creation is designed to concentrate more wealth at the top, reinforcing existing economic and societal fault lines rather than solving them.
It's a feature, not a bug.
It's important to analyze the immediate environment where Blakeley's critique actually lives, because the medium inevitably shapes the message and its reception.
Definitely. She's uploading the serious political economic analysis about enclosure and exploitation directly onto TikTok.
Which places her sophisticated argument in a highly fragmented, attention-driven environment. I mean, when you scroll past Blakeley's content, the suggested accounts and trending topics surrounding her video,
It's chaos.
it's high-profile celebrities, celebrity gossip, and purely aesthetic, high-engagement content like satisfying jellybed trends or quinceañera videos.
And that contrast is the operating condition of the platform. Blakeley's focused systems-level argument has to fight against content that is specifically engineered for immediate gratification and emotional pull.
So she has to maintain that political economic sharpness, that confrontational language about billionaires, just to stand out in an environment dominated by aesthetic luxury and distraction.
And we really need to analyze how TikTok's structure shapes reception. The platform favors speed and emotional resonance over the slow digestion of contextual knowledge.
So while Blakeley is really effective at highlighting critical keywords, labor conditions, real harms, billionaires, the full structural depth of data colonialism with its historical, cultural, and political lineage described by Hao.
It's difficult to absorb. It's hard to get that full context when it's compressed and immediately surrounded by highly engaging, non-political distraction.
So the critique achieves this massive amplification and reach, but there's an undeniable dilution in structural depth.
Right. The listener gets the powerful headline, "The billionaires are lying about AI safety." But they might miss the complex, multi-layered mechanics of extraction and wealth consolidation that actually substantiate the claim. There's this necessary ambiguity introduced by the platform's compression logic.
And here lies the ultimate irony of the medium, which Blakeley has to navigate.
Which is?
She is offering a penetrating critique of global corporate power, the systems of algorithmic attention, and the mass surveillance that fundamentally underpin the very extraction she's criticizing.
And she has to deliver that critique using the infrastructure that is intrinsically tied to that exact system of algorithmic governance.
She is using the empire's tools to criticize the empire.
The surrounding context just suggests a fundamental conflict built into the platform itself. The user is presented with a choice: a difficult, systems-level analysis demanding structural change, or the simple satisfaction of immediate high dopamine content.
And the platform, by design, encourages fragmentation of understanding. It makes it harder to synthesize the material reality she is detailing into actionable insight.
It really underscores the difficulty of mobilizing systemic change when the primary tools of mass communication are owned and optimized by the very powers being critiqued. Blakeley's work attempts to hijack that platform's attention system just long enough to deliver a crucial system update to the user's perception of what AI truly is.
So to wrap this up, what Grace Blakeley helps us understand differently is this necessary critical shift in perspective regarding AI governance and risk.
She effectively forces the debate away from the theoretical dangers of futuristic technology safety, that doomer position, and she anchors it firmly in present-day political economy, the empire extraction position.
And this reframing is essential because it fundamentally changes how we define risk. It shifts the goalposts entirely.
Context reshapes the meaning of the terms we use.
Right. For the tech elite, AI safety means preventing rogue AGI from reaching superintelligence and causing human extinction.
But for Blakeley and the critics who follow this empire logic, AI safety means something completely different.
It means safety from immediate, verifiable exploitation.
Safety from IP theft, safety from environmental ruin, safety from the symptomatic devaluation of labor, and safety from the consolidation of political and economic power in the hands of a tiny handful of Silicon Valley elites.
Her analysis reveals that the structure of the AI revolution, the unprecedented scale, the reliance on ghost work, the secrecy, the money-fueled quest for compute, it's not an accidental byproduct of innovation.
No, it is, by design, a meticulously crafted formula for empire construction.
The sources confirm this structural ambition. Sam Altman himself has mused that the most successful founders create something closer to a religion.
And the vagueness of the mission to benefit humanity, it allows for this continuous, convenient reinterpretation to justify consolidating massive amounts of talent, capital, and global resources,
regardless of the immediate material cost to communities or workers.
And this highlights the necessity of demanding a systems analysis instead of simply accepting the slogans provided by the builders. We can't rely on the people who design the system of wealth concentration to unilaterally fix its social and environmental side effects.
Especially when their governance model, as we saw in the OpenAI crisis, just dissolves the moment it threatens financial interest.
Therefore, the solution, according to this structural critique, isn't better technology or even more sophisticated PR strategies. It's a necessary, democratic redistribution of power.
And that redistribution needs to happen along three critical axes that Blakeley's work emphasizes: knowledge, resources, and influence.
Okay, let's break that down. Redistributing knowledge requires a radical demand for transparency. We need funding for independent research organizations outside the AI empires to conduct robust evaluations of corporate models.
And policymakers have to demand that companies relinquish key details about their training data, their technical specs, their supply chain dependencies.
It's the bare minimum for addressing real-world harms like systemic discrimination and misinformation, which are data-defined and require external oversight.
And then redistributing resources. That demands stronger protections for workers and creators globally.
It means urgently updating intellectual property laws, so these AI empires can't just get away with seizing IP without compensation. It requires visibility into supply chains and labor practices, making it impossible to rely on middlemen to outsource the psychological and physical burden of ghost work.
And most critically, it means strong labor protections.
Unionization, accountability for extraction across the board, guaranteeing minimum wages and humane conditions for ghost workers, and securing protections against automation for writers and artists. This fundamentally challenges that scale at all costs logic.
The ultimate goal, as Blakeley implies, is to democratize control over a consequential technology that, by its current design, only reinforces the concentration of wealth.
So we have to ask ourselves, as the listener, what does this analysis leave us to consider?
If the mission of AI to benefit humanity is merely, as Blakeley's analysis suggests, a uniquely potent formula for consolidating resources and constructing an empire-esque power structure, how can individuals and policymakers resist the current logic of unprecedented scale and consumption?
And instead, how can we foster development that is community-driven, consensual, respectful of local context and history?
We want to acknowledge the work that served as the foundation for this deep dive. Thank you to Grace Blakeley for her critical political economic reframing of the AI debate.
And deep thanks to Karen Hao, whose investigative journalism in Empire of AI provided essential context and substance to this analysis. This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind crisis and perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon. For a shorter visual overview, see the mini explainer linked in the description.
If you enjoyed this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with creators or ideas you'd like us to explore next.